This afternoon's program is in 4 parts. We will begin with candidate introductions, followed by 3 rounds of prepared questions, followed by a round of 1-minute grab bag questions, and concluding with a final closing question. I will first begin the introduction section by reading the 30-second introductions that each candidate submitted or that we obtained from their candidate website. And then in that same prearranged order, each candidate is going to be given that 1 minute for opening remarks to tell you why that candidate should get your vote. So we start today with Guy Phillips. Councilman Guy Phillips began his second term on the Scottsdale City Council in January 2017. Councilman Phillips was raised in Phoenix, where he graduated from Camelback High School in 1977. He moved to Scottsdale in 1994. With his wife, Cora, they have raised a family of 5 children who had all attended Scottsdale Public Schools. He attended Maricopa Community College and subsequently started the air conditioning contracting business that he still owns and operates today. He is a member of the Better Business Bureau, the Arizona Small Business Association, the North Scottsdale Chamber of Commerce, the Heritage Foundation, the National Rifle Association, and the Arizona Archaeological Society. Mr. Phillips, you may introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, thank you very much. A lot of those things you listed, I'm not actually on anymore. I guess this needs to be updated. But obviously most of it's true. Moved here in Scottsdale, I have a small air conditioning business. I did hurt myself in an accident last September, and so I'm pretty much semi-retired. I'm a second-term city councilman running for my 3rd term. I'm the only incumbent running. And I run on a platform of public safety being number 1. And then also I push tourism, and I like to help small business. I've helped a lot of small businesses get through the red tape or bureaucracy, and also to be able to continue in their business. So I guess with that said, that's about it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Maxwell, Kevin Maxwell, was born in Kansas, is a dog lover, avid golfer, and drummer. He is a volunteer for Prada del Sol, Scottsdale Public Library, and Sky Kids. Mr. Maxwell has a degree in technical communication and user experience from ASU. He is a certified Amazon Cloud practitioner. Mr. Maxwell's community involvement includes serving as the chair for the Airport Advisory Commission, a member of the board of directors for the Family Promise as consultant for the Scottsdale Coalition of Today and Tomorrow, a co-founder of Fuel Scottsdale. He has served on the board of directors for Scottsdale Leadership from 2014 to 2017, and as a consultant for the Scottsdale Area Chamber of Commerce from 2018 to 2019. Please welcome Mr. Maxwell. Mr. Maxwell, the floor is yours.
Mr. Maxwell, just hold on. You are not unmuted yet. Let me unmute you. Just give me a second. For some reason, you are not. There you go. You are on, sir.
Oh, okay. I thought I was unmuted the whole time. Thank you so much, Julian. Thank you for the league. Scottsdale's been my home for 30 years. I want to ensure our city is led by people who listen to citizens and believe in transparent dialogue. With a significant downturn in the economy on the horizon, it's important that city council is populated with candidates who are able to process complicated financial and economic information. I'm an analyst by trade. I'm also an active listener. I like to regularly take financial data and come up with data-driven solutions to sophisticated financial problems, and that's precisely what we need on city council right now. I love Scottsdale, and I want to see it thrive for many years to come. I want to see a prosperous community where jobs are abundant and taxes are low. I want our residents to enjoy the many amenities Scottsdale has to offer, like our open spaces and our preserve. And I think I'm uniquely qualified to ensure that that vision becomes a reality. That's Kevin Maxwell.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. John Little. Mr. Little has been endorsed by a number of former city council members, former city managers, former fire chiefs, and the police officers of Scottsdale Association. He is the former city manager of Scottsdale and served as the chief of staff to legendary Scottsdale Mayor Herb Drinkwater, who impressed upon him that potholes aren't Democrats or Republicans, they just need fixing. That essential sense of responsibility has informed John Little's entire career in public service. He is a lifelong civil servant and has played key roles on the issues of transportation, revitalization, protecting neighborhoods, and civil discourse. Please welcome John Little.
Thank you. You know, I began my campaign about a year ago and promised to build on our past successes in Scottsdale and make it even a better place. But how have things changed in the last year? And even things have changed during the last week. And in this past week, we've once again been reminded that words matter. From our childhood, we recall the old nursery rhyme that said, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me." Well, how wrong we were. Words hurt, and they can hurt people very badly. They hurt people who already feel oppressed and marginalized. They hurt you, they hurt me, they hurt our economy, they hurt our city, our reputation, and our spirit. You know, there's a difference between pandering and problem solving. And now we must choose a leader who knows the difference. We need tested and principled leadership, and not to put this past week's events behind us, but to put them squarely in front of us. We need proven leaders to take on the pandemic, to rebuild our economy, to restore dignity. And I am John Little, and I am that leader. Thank you.
The chime is lovely. Thank you, Mr. Little.
Thank you.
Becca Linnig. Becca Linnig and her family have called Scottsdale home for over 22 years. She and her husband enjoy 3 children, a daughter-in-law, and a grandson that just turned 1 this month. When Becca was not working as a full-time realtor and a property manager, you will see her volunteering in downtown Scottsdale as an ambassador, or you may have taken one of the free historic tours she offers through the city's neighborhood service program. Becca is a lifelong servant and is excited about serving the members of the community by giving the voice of a wife, mother, business owner, and community advocate on City Council. Please welcome Becca Linnig.
Thank you, Julie. We haven't had a council member south of Shea in over 15 years. I live south of Shea. I also have children in the public school system, and I run a successful business. You may have recognized me on the corner of Brown and Main or Fifth Avenue in Stetson. I spent a lot of time downtown as a city ambassador, and I've done that for almost 2 decades. I volunteer as the point of contact for visitors and residents alike. I was president of the Scottsdale Area Association of Realtors in 2018, currently serve on the state board as well as the National Board of Real Estate. I have been through several budget and strategic planning cycles, and am well versed in being able to handle issues that we face as a city. We're facing new challenges almost daily. We need someone that has the ability to stay calm, to educate, collaborate, and then dissect the issues in front of us. Scottsdale is home for me and my family, and this will be the address that I have when I leave the earth. So I'm very passionate about this city, and will continue to stay involved, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Linnig. Betty Janik. Mrs. Janik has been a resident of Scottsdale for 16 years. She attended the University of Illinois, Chicago, where she received a BS in chemistry. She was a research chemist at J.D. Searle, conducting investigations on blood chemistry, for which she was published. Betty is a co-founder of the Protect Our Preserve, which led to the successful passage of Prop 420. She is the past president of the Coalition of Greater Scottsdale. She was a member of the Bond PAC Committee for the Best of Scottsdale. Betty has been married to her husband, Joe, for 48 years, is the mother to 3 and nana to 8 grandchildren. Please welcome Betty Janik.
Hello, thank you very much for hosting this. And what I want to talk about is the fact that I think the primary responsibility of a city council member is to represent the citizens. And right now, for the past 4 years, city council majority has voted positively to approve zoning changes that I think most of the residents are pretty upset with. At least that's what I hear. So I'm running as a voice for the citizens, and I'm kind of running to change the majority on city council, where the citizens, the businessmen, the community all come together to work together for the common good. So what I promise is that I will listen to the residents, and I will make sure they're at the table and their ideas are involved in all the changes that we see. I want to enhance the quality of life with thoughtful growth. So we need to look at the neighborhoods. What is compatible with the neighborhood? What do the people want in their neighborhood? And yet, what can we do for the businesses in the neighborhood as well? And then finally, I want to make sure that we follow the existing codes, that we come up with a really good general plan that the people will approve, not like what's happened in the past couple years, and that it fulfills their view for what they want the city to be, their dream for the city. And I'm hoping that the future is very bright in the future to come, but it's been a very tough couple weeks for all of us, for the city, for everyone, and I hope that we can put that behind us and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Janik. Tom Durham. Mr. Durham has resided full-time in Scottsdale since 2015.
If I might interrupt as a point of order, Mrs. Janik took a whole lot more than 1 minute, but we'd like to advise everyone to stay within the time frame, please. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Durham has resided full-time in Scottsdale since 2015 with his wife, Martha, and ordained Episcopal deacon for the Episcopal Church of the Nativity in Scottsdale. He has 2 sons. He loves to ride bikes and enjoys riding his bike in Scottsdale. Mr. Durham worked for the international firm Mayer Brown in Chicago. Mr. Durham specialized in tax controversy, representing the firm's clients in audits, trials, and appeals against the IRS. During that time in Mayer Brown, he was recognized as Chambers USA as one of the top 25 tax controversy lawyers in the United States. He retired in 2015. Mr. Durham served as the treasurer of Protect Our Preserve PAC. Mr. Durham has a degree in philosophy and history from Cornell in 1977 and a law degree from New York University Law School in New York City in 1980. Please welcome Tom Durham.
Thank you. I'm running for city council because I think that many Scottsdale citizens have lost faith in the council majority. As Julie just mentioned, I became involved in Scottsdale politics because of the Desert Discovery Center. It was clear to me that the citizens of Scottsdale were overwhelmingly opposed to the Desert Discovery Center. And I couldn't understand why the council majority was pushing a plan that was so unpopular. So I raised my hand and volunteered, and my good friend Betty Janik asked me to serve as treasurer of the Protect Our Preserve PAC, and I agreed. And the rest is history. Scottsdale citizens overwhelmingly voted against the Desert Discovery Center.
See if I can get to the Zoom.
Following the Desert Discovery Center, I began to pay more attention to the council majority, and I continually found that the council majority voted against the interests of citizens and in favor of large developers. And that's why I'd like to join the council. I would like to reverse that trend and be a voice for the citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Durham. Bill Crawford. Mr. Crawford is a proud husband, father, grandfather, community leader, and business owner. For more than 22 years, he has had the privilege of owning and operating a successful business in downtown Scottsdale with his wife, Debbie. In addition to his business experience, Bill has spent the past 2 decades taking on tough city issues, resulting in wins for our residents, neighborhoods, and businesses. He cares deeply about Scottsdale and will work tirelessly to get our city and economy back on track. Welcome, Bill Crawford.
Bill, are you unmuted? Sir? Bill?
Can you hear me?
Great, great. We can hear you.
I'm so sorry about that. First of all, I want to thank the League of Women Voters. I understand there's a lot of work that goes into this. I appreciate being here. And I understand the complexities of all of the coordination that takes place here. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my viewpoints with the voters. So thank you again. In such trying times, I think that it's very important to have someone that has experience and proven a track record in solving problems and making things work with the communities in Scottsdale. For 22 years, my wife and I have owned a business in downtown Scottsdale. and we've been involved in community issues. I've been a community leader. I don't want to leave out the fact that I've got 10 years of law enforcement experience with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, which I think is very important in these trying times. And I have participated in moving downtown Scottsdale forward with a lot of different projects that add to economic vitality. And I just want to continue to be able to help Scottsdale move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Tammy Caputi. Ms. Caputi has been a Scottsdale resident and business owner for over 20 years. She is the president of Yale Electric West, a wholesale supplier of lighting and electrical products. Tammy has a BA in economics from Wellesley College and a MBA from Simmons University. She is a fellow with the Flynn Brown Center for Civic Leadership. She has 3 children in our local public schools and has served the last 3 years on the Development Review Board. She's currently the chair of SCOT, an organization dedicated to expanding public awareness of important local issues. Please welcome Tammy Caputi.
Thanks, Julie. I'm Tammy Caputi, and I'm running for City Council to be a positive, forward-thinking voice for Scottsdale. We need leaders who have the skills, experience, and vision to help rebuild our local economy. We need council members who will govern with facts and open minds and integrity. As a 3-year member of our Development Review Board, I have a track record of doing this. I've built my own successful business providing electrical supplies that bring light to our hospitals and roadways, our airports and ballparks. I work in an industry that experiences regular downturns, and I know how to pivot to new opportunities. I want to maintain Scottsdale's winning formula of high amenities, strong property values, and low property taxes. We need to balance our open spaces with nurturing our economic drivers. As a mother of 3 children in our local public schools, I'm committed to making Scottsdale an even better city for them than it's been for me. Learn more about me at tammycaputi.com. Thank you for being here today. I'm Tammy Caputi, and I'd be honored for your vote.
Thank you so much, Ms. Caputi. Mike Arbach. Mr. Arbach is a small business owner who moved to Scottsdale, where he felt he could enjoy the best quality of life and grow his business free of burdensome regulations. He has lived in Scottsdale for 10 years. Mr. Arbach is a former Parks and Recreation Commissioner in the city of Scottsdale and former vice chair of the Neighborhood Advisory Commission for the city of Scottsdale. He is a precinct committeeman for the Republican Party, Legislative District 23, and state delegate. Mike has a Bachelor of Arts degree in Communications and a Culinary Arts degree. Please welcome Mike Arbach.
Thank you. Scottsdale, the city we love and chose. From the McDowell Mountain Preserve in the north to iconic Old Town in the south, Scottsdale truly is a special place. We, the residents of Scottsdale, embody its rugged individualism and frontier spirit. Hi, I'm Michael Auerbach, a Scottsdale resident, a small business owner in the hospitality industry, and lover of our country and our city. Like many of you, I'm concerned about Scottsdale's future. We face challenges on many fronts. To meet these challenges, we need enhanced tourism, smart growth, and a voice for the protection of individual liberties and values. I see a bright future for Scottsdale as we go into a new decade. We can preserve our unique character and grow for the future. I felt a deep connection to Scottsdale long before I moved here. My father is also in the hospitality industry and worked with many of the Scottsdale makers and vision planners, many of whom I have the pleasure of working with today. That is why I am running for Scottsdale City Council. I'm invested in Scottsdale's future, and I ask for your vote. Vote Mike, Mike for Scottsdale.
Thank you so much, Mr. Arbach. Audience, you have heard the introductions of our 9 candidates, and we move on to part 2 of our program this afternoon. The League of Women Voters have 3 questions prepared for each candidate to answer this afternoon. Each candidate will have 1 minute per question, and when deemed appropriate, a 30-second rebuttal to another candidate may be offered by the moderator. Moving on to question 1. With the reported increase of COVID-19 cases in Arizona, what are your specific plans for Scottsdale to establish and enforce community guidelines for residents to behave responsibly to reduce the health crisis, in addition to the council helping businesses cope with the economic impact? Consistent with our pre-arranged order, we will start with Mr. Maxwell. Mr. Maxwell.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You know, these are really unprecedented times for us. Every community in the nation as a whole is trying to figure out how we can get past this pandemic once and for all. It's been terrible. It's shut down our businesses, and thousands of lives have obviously been lost. So it's a very, very difficult time for us. And I think that we need to be able to be flexible in our solutions, because we're learning as a nation and communities as we go through this. I think that what I can do right now is to set a good example, and I want this behind us once and for all. I want to get back to normal as quickly as possible. And I want our business to remain open, unencumbered, to operate at 100% capacity. So in order to do that, I'm going to follow a guideline set by the CDC and our government and our mayor that says we need to wear masks. And I'm going to be a good citizen and try to be a good role model to do that. So while I do that, I hope others will follow. Also, I'm looking for ideas for innovation. I heard an interesting idea this morning from Florida where they stopped selling alcohol at some of the bars to try to get some of the people to not be able to go. So if people can't operate responsibly, I think that it's our turn to do something to sort of mandate that. So that's what I'm going to do, is be a responsible citizen and try to be a good role model.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. Mr. Little.
Yes, thank you. I think the first thing we need to do to address the pandemic is to agree on the facts and to follow the science. My wife works at Honor Health, and she tells me every day of the ravages of this disease, and it is not a hoax, it is not phony, it's a real deal. And so it's something very important for us to be able to wear our masks. Everyone should be wearing their masks in public and adhering to the guidelines that the CDC established, like Kevin just mentioned. It's critically important. Social distancing is important. And I think that we need all businesses to respect what that mandate is. I support Mayor Lane's mandatory wearing of masks in public executive order. And also, I would just like to say, when we get this economy back on track, it'll be because we are a healthy city, and we need to position ourselves as the healthiest city in America. And that's one of my campaign platform issues.
Thank you, Mr. Little. Ms. Linick.
Thank you. I think the most difficult thing is we had a false sense of security at the beginning of this pandemic. We saw very low numbers at the beginning, and therefore we felt like we were basically untouchable. And what we found is that our numbers are peaking much later than others while they're starting to recover. And it's important for us to set a good example. Wearing masks is important, as well as making sure that you're being respectful, not only to other people that are concerned, but to yourself by maintaining the CDC guidelines. And so I would also like to see the injection of the CARES Act money that was issued to Scottsdale into those local businesses. They are running at a very, very low capacity, and they need that influx of money to be able to keep their doors open and keep their employees paid. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Janik.
Okay, what I wanted to start by saying is that there is no way we're going to return to our full economic vitality in Scottsdale until we get COVID under control. And I have some numbers that are hot off the press. Today, we had 2,775 new active cases of COVID. On June 1st, we only had 137. We need to do better. It is not okay to overwhelm our medical hospitals, our staff, with these people that are ill. We want to protect our citizens. So what I think we need to consider first is we need to mask when we're out in public. I applaud Mayor Lane for what he said, and I'm happy that he is supporting this. Number two, we need to make sure that we do the social distancing when we're out in public. And number three, we need to wash our hands. All of these are the guidelines from the CDC. So that's great that we do that. And as far as the businesses go, the businesses have to take a leading role, especially the bars and the restaurants. And I think number one, they get a warning if they're not following these guidelines. Number two, there's a fine. And number three, I think they need to be shut down. We need to set a good example, and we need to keep our city healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Janik. Mr. Durham.
The first, second, and third things we need to do are to wear masks. It's very simple. I know they're annoying. I don't like to wear one, but it's a simple solution. And we're not going to get our economy reopened. We're not going to be able to go back to church, eat at restaurants, and all those other things we love to do unless we can beat this. And the only way to beat it is, frankly, is to wear masks. And I'm glad to see that there's been strict enforcement at the bars and restaurants in the Old Town area that were misbehaving. That's really critical to get those people social distancing and wearing masks. If we've got some money left over from the CARES Act, I'd certainly like to think of sharing that with small businesses, but the city itself is having a hard time too. The one thing I think the city can do is relax a little bit on regulations, on eating outside, serving drinks to go. And the city should think of other ways to make it easier on small businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Durham. Mr. Crawford.
During the Vietnam War and the Gulf War and the Iraq War, modern medicine jumped ahead light years in their knowledge and practice of treating trauma. We learned things that we never knew before. And because of that, we've been able to save countless lives in the modern age. That's exactly what's happening right now. This is a learn as you go. And, you know, we've been watching very closely for months. We've had an impact with this, but we've learned a lot and we've made mistakes. We've corrected those mistakes. There's a lot of things that were said early on that we found out just weren't true. And the nation as a whole has corrected its behavior. But it's important, it's necessary that we screw this thing down tight. And we do that by doing everything we can to support the policies. I support the mayor's masking policy. I support social distancing. We're practicing those things in our business in downtown because we have to. And I support doing everything that we can to help guide our business, which runs our economy and pays our taxes, forward so that we can keep going and we can have an income stream and economic vitality.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Ms. Caputi.
I think the important thing to remember right now is that public health is of absolute paramount importance. That should be our absolute concern here. We need leaders who are going to govern with ethics and facts and not pander to partisan politics. This is a continually moving target situation, and we need to gather as much data as we can, analyze it, and make good decisions. We certainly shouldn't be armchair quarterbacking our leaders. I think so far we've done a good job of, again, evaluating the data and moving into the direction that makes the most sense. Protecting our citizens is absolutely paramount. As far as getting back business, for sure, we need to be pivoting there immediately. Make sure that we take advantage of all the federal funds available to us, make sure that those get directed to our small business community, work with Experience Scottsdale to reinvigorate our economics as fast as we can. And Penny's giving me the sign, so let's look to the future.
Thank you, Ms. Caputi. Mr. Arbach.
I believe in protecting the safety and privacy of everyone. Protecting our fundamental First Amendment rights is not a trivial matter. It should be taken as a priority at every level of government. Everyone should be free to peacefully live out their beliefs without fear of unjust punishment by the government. The city of Scottsdale has a $38 million budget deficit because of the lack of sales tax that was generated by the short cutting of the Cactus League season, as well as the allocation of federal money that the governor had awarded to the city. The city manager and city treasurer were projecting $45 million. The city of Scottsdale got $29.6 million. As the only candidate being considered in the hospitality industry, I know how to best and wisely enhance tourism and make a quick economic recovery from the COVID-19.
Thank you, Mr. Arbach. Mr. Phillips.
Thank you. So of that 29 million, we designated $3.5 million from the CARES Act. And we're going to be using that to educate the public. I've been working with the city manager. We're going to go to businesses. We're going to do seminars. We will distribute masks to public facilities and for the children's stuff. We also need to create awareness. And this was been my thing from the beginning, is that we need education. When we allowed people out, we opened the barn doors and everybody ran out and they ran to the bars. We had no education of how we should. We said, do this, do that, but we didn't educate on how to do it. And I think a lot of people just went ahead and did whatever they felt like doing. And that's, I think, what caused the spike. I have to say that there's a lot of people that have lung ailments and problems, and masks can be dangerous. Masks can be dangerous to a 3-year-old child who takes a nap with a mask on and doesn't wake up. We have to be educated on this. We can't just force people into servitude, so to speak. This mask mandate that everybody probably knows I'm against the mandate, not the mask. Wear a mask, be kind to your fellow citizen, but you can't wear it 24/7. You can't have a mask on 8 hours and expect to get any air. And this is bad for a lot of people. It's bad for older people as well. But the mandate, if you get a citation for not wearing a mask, it's a class 1 misdemeanor. If you have a class 1 misdemeanor and you're applying for a license for a realtor, you probably won't get approved. I mean, this is way too strict, and I believe education rather than subjugation is the way to go.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. It appears that we have lost our host, perhaps momentarily this afternoon.
You're muted, Penny.
Penny, we can't hear you.
Okay, there you go. I'm here. I'm so sorry. I just took myself off video so that it wouldn't interfere with the candidates as they make presentations. I'd like to also point out, because it picks up sound, and as you move around, it switches the image of the speaker with your image. So if you could mute yourself or at least try to keep the sound down, it'll help us. Thank you so much. Are you ready for the next question?
Yes.
Okay.
Question 2. The current Scottsdale law enforcement use of force policy only includes de-escalation and use of force continuum, and marginally addresses requiring exhausting all alternatives before shooting and bans shooting at moving vehicles. Do you think these policies are sufficient? If yes, why? If no, what additional policies would you recommend? For this question, we will begin with Mr. Little. Mr. Little, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, I actually support the current use of force policies. I think they can be expanded, and the way to expand those is not to sit in a place like this and try to imagine what might work better. We initiated community policing over 20 years ago in the city of Scottsdale, and it worked very nicely. And I believe that if we were to expand use of force policy and re-examine our current policy, I think it'd be really important for us to interact with the citizens. That's what they're asking for. They're asking to have a voice at the table so that they can engage with law enforcement and talk about how we strengthen community policing. It wasn't too many years ago where we actually took police officers and we helped them buy homes in Scottsdale where they could bring their squad cars and park in front of their homes so that law enforcement had a presence in our community. I think we need to return to that kind of community policing, and I think that we need to get input from the citizens about use of force. It's a community conversation that we need to have, and it's long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Little. Ms. Linning.
Thank you. I do feel like there is a disconnect between the city departments, not just police, but all city departments, as well as the city council and city residents. And I think that it's extremely important that we open those lines of communication between all members of the city. And, it reminds me when citizens feel like they have the ability to put themselves into a position where maybe they feel like a police activity wasn't handled properly. I think it's very difficult as someone that's never been in the police force to be able to know the type of training and the fact that every day that they leave their home, they're putting their life on the line. And I encourage every single resident of Scottsdale to call and do an appointment for a ride-along. I have done my ride-along in dispatch as well as with a local police officer, and it's very eye-opening. So I encourage that.
Thank you, Ms. Linning. Mrs. Janik, the floor is yours.
Okay, I think what we need to do is go back and re-examine what we have. I think what we have has worked very, very well for a long time, but I think there's always room for improvement. And I think one of the keys, which most of the other candidates have agreed with, is that we need to have better communication between the citizens, city council, and the police force. Being a policeman is a very, very difficult job. And I don't think it helps anybody to second guess what they did and how they responded in past events. I think the other thing that we should look at is that there's methodology to do better screening for the people that we do hire on to the police force. And I think if we do that along with more community involvement, I think we'll improve what we see with the police and their effectiveness and keeping Scottsdale safe. But I think they do a very, very good job with the document that we currently have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Janik. Mr. Durham.
A young citizen reached out to me on my website through my Facebook page, and we've been having a conversation about some principles that are set forth in a website called 8 Can't Wait. And the 8 Can't Wait website has 8 pretty simple principles, I think. And I believe that our Scottsdale department is following most of them, but I thought they were a really good starting places. The 8 Can't Wait principles included, of course, no chokeholds, the duty to intervene, and to make sure that people are reprimanded if they don't intervene, better reporting, better nationwide reporting, and local reporting of police incidents. That's really essential because the officer in Minneapolis had a pretty long line of disciplinary issues which had never been addressed. Some of these are going to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Durham. Mr. Crawford.
As the only candidate that has actually real law enforcement experience, 10 years in the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, doing all aspects, all details, qualifying to arm, I have a unique perspective on enforcement. And what I can tell you is that all of the training in Arizona is uniform. It's AZ Post. And our rank and file guys with boots on the ground, they are highly trained and they know exactly what to do. And when you are in a situation that unfolds in split seconds, you don't think, you fall back on your training. And that training is vital. And we cannot untie their hands to have to conform to the way the citizens want to see this in life or death situations. What we can do is we can improve the command at the top, who recently we had a colossal failure with the protection of our Scottsdale mall that resulted in $38 million worth of damage. We can do a better job.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Ms. Caputi.
Sure. I absolutely support what the police have put in place. I think, just as I said on the previous question, things are moving continually and changing, and we need to be able to adapt and adjust. If we're going to move towards a more community-based policing strategy, then that's going to be a gradual over time situation. And of course, as everyone else has mentioned, we need to make sure that we're getting the opinions of the whole community. We have organizations and commissions like the Human Relations Commission that are working on this. We also have a community-based police program that people have had excellent luck with. I know I've spent a day at the academy myself, and I as well know that it's hard for us to put ourselves in these shoes until we've spent that time as a police officer. It's just, we can't speak from outside. But yes, we need to keep moving and getting better and adjusting and adapting to the situation as it evolves, and we need to support our police officers. I'm proud to say that I have the endorsement of the police officers of Scottsdale, and I will endorse it, and I will support their efforts in every way that I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Caputi. Mr. Arbach.
What happened in Old Town Scottsdale was disgusting. And if I am honored to serve as your city councilman, I would not allow something like that to occur on my watch. I've been endorsed by a former NYPD detective who on 9/11 was in the transit system, and his name is Representative John Kavanaugh of Legislative District 23. There's no need to be pandering to the whims of the crowds of people. Law enforcement put their life on the line every time they put on that uniform and go out to do their tour of duty, not knowing what confronts them. And a strong show of force is necessary because hoodlums and actors from out of Scottsdale came into our beautiful Old Town and destroyed one of the most beautiful shopping malls in the country. And that is not acceptable.
Thank you, Mr. Arbach. Mr. Phillips. Mr. Phillips, we cannot hear you.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so number one, I've always said public safety is my number one priority. I've been on the council for 8 years. I have always supported the police. I support funding them 100%, 110%. The main thing about Scottsdale is public safety. People need to know that their home is secure. People need to know that their businesses are secure. What happened at Passion Square, we don't really know. I went to the council and I asked them to have an investigation into that because, as Mr. Auerbach said, it's not acceptable. We have to make sure that everybody feels safe in Scottsdale and everybody's business is safe in Scottsdale. So I asked for that investigation. They will come back with their conclusions and then we'll discuss it from there. But aside from that, the police department has been very good for Scottsdale. I think overall everybody's happy with them. They've done a great job for us in the past and the future. And I look forward to continue working with them.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. To remind the candidates, this question is about the use of force protocols and what additional policies would or would not be recommended. Mr. Maxwell.
Julie, thank you. I was just getting ready to restate the question. The question is de-escalation of force, yes or no? So I was focused on that. Yeah, my answer to that is yes. I think that our policy on de-escalation works appropriately and effectively. Now, I will also tell you that I had conversations this week with leadership from the police department from 2 different people, and I know they're committed to making sure that they're learning lessons and constantly pivoting and making sure they have agile policies in place that can change over time. I'm also in favor of looking at our policies and making sure they're aligned with our community needs. But I think our police department is doing a great job. I think their de-escalation policy is appropriate for the job they're tasked to do. So yes.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. Which means that we have concluded question number 2. Penny, would you please share question number 3 with the candidate? Question number 3. There seems to be a lack of agreement between the City Council and the citizens of Scottsdale on development issues. The DDC proposal and the recent Southbridge 2 issue are examples. How would you propose to ensure that the City Council and the citizens address these development issues together? We will be starting with Ms. Linnig.
I think it's extremely important to expand the community outreach when a project is being proposed. Right now, developers are required to go within a small radius around the community that will be affected. And so I would like to see that expand. And also I would like to see a lot more ways for people to become involved in that conversation. So it's about community involvement and education. And I feel that if we give the citizens an opportunity to see what the projects offer, and if we give the developers an opportunity to discuss what the residents need and want, that we can find a happy medium.
Thank you, Ms. Lennick. Mrs. Janik.
I think this is definitely an issue that I would like to address if I'm lucky enough, fortunate enough to be on city council. I don't think the citizens have been listened to. I think when you see what happened with Protect Our Preserve and the Desert Edge, as well as Southbridge 2, where the citizens had to basically do referendums, initiatives to get their voices heard, that shows there's a problem. So what I would like to do is I would like to recommend that there would be 5 advisory commissions set up. One would be in the southern part of the area, one would be in downtown, one would be central, one would be north, and then what we call far north or north 2, where the communities could get together. There'd be leadership in the community, and we could get community input from each one of those zones because they do have special needs. And then they in turn would report to the city council and to city staff so that we have better lines of communication and we could come up with better plans for development of the city that the citizens would be in tune with. Thank you. Good timing.
Thank you, Mrs. Janik. Mr. Durham. Sir, something's wrong with your audio.
I was a vigorous opponent to both the Desert Discovery Center and Southbridge 2. And I think the community was involved in those 2 projects. They were involved in leading a revolution because the council didn't listen to them. The 4-person majority on the council heard loud and clear what citizens wanted. They heard it and they ignored it. So really the only way we can get clear communication on this is to elect people to the council who are willing to listen to the voices of the citizens on these projects. And unfortunately, it's also tied up with campaign contributions. The majority on the council regularly takes large donations from developers and then votes for their projects. And that's got to stop.
Thank you, Mr. Durham. Mr. Crawford.
Right now, the city of Scottsdale has a lot of mechanisms for public input. We've got the Development Review Board, we've got the Planning Commission, and then finally we have the City Council. So the world is run by those who show up to run it. There's lots of opportunities and advertising and community outreach on all of these projects. Scottsdale is 35 miles long. There's several different community characters within that 35 miles. And we have to have builders, we have to have development moving forward, especially now after we've had these economic catastrophic issues. So this project that was the fuse that lit so much controversy cost us $750 million, 2 years of planning, and who knows how much in future tax revenue. And it was used really more to build a political base than to stop a project. So I'm all about smart and compatible growth in the right places, and I will continue to push that agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Ms. Caputi.
I think that you can never have too much community outreach. Of course, it's important to loop people in widely and early. We do have a development review board of which I sat on, a planning commission and a council, and many opportunities for citizens to be involved. And of course, we can continue to expand on that. We also should probably move forward with our general plan because it is, although just aspirational, it's great for people to have a roadmap about how to move forward. I've seen many examples on DRB of projects getting better with community input, and we absolutely have a process that works. The most regretful thing about losing some of these recent projects, I agree, we lost at least $300 million in annual revenue from not building a project like Southbridge, and we really need to understand that we're at a crossroads in our city right now. We cannot bubble wrap our city. We have to have thoughtful growth, but we need to move forward. We are not a bedroom community. Our economy works with high amenities, low property taxes, and strong property values. The way that we make that work is that we have projects that are economically resilient and vibrant so that we have a formula that works for our whole community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Arbach.
Scottsdale voters need a leader with the discernment to know how and where to grow and where not to grow. An advocate who's committed to protecting our signature events and open spaces, and a voice for the principles that will encourage a thriving economy. I was against the Desert Discovery Center. The reason that I was against it was back in 2013, I was involved with the Scottsdale Chamber Economic Advisory Committee and the Public Policy Committee. And at the time, the proponents were asking the city of Scottsdale to fund $72 million for an infinite period of time because their operating budget and their business model could not sustain the project that was being placed there. In addition to the fact that putting a commercial operation in that part of the reserve where I and my dog hike on a regular basis is not what Scottsdale is. That's a crown jewel that the residents reach into their pocket and pay a part of a penny and have voted to continue to tax themselves to protect that preserve. And we need someone who has the leadership to know that a 10 or 12 or 15 story building doesn't belong in every place of Scottsdale.
Thank you, Mr. Arbach. Mr. Phillips.
Well, thank you. So back when they were going to do the DDC and I was on the council, or I wasn't on the council yet, but I created a video to create awareness for what they wanted to do because the preserve is a preserve, not something to be built upon. And from there, I think POP was created, Protect Our Preserve. And I also helped with the referendum for Southbridge 2. And the problem with Southbridge 2, it was too narrow, it was too high, and it would have destroyed Fifth Avenue. I'm not against development. I'm against development that destroys our old town. We have to protect the old town just like we have to protect the preserve. Let's be honest here. You can have all the zones you want. You can have all the citizen input you want. If you don't have 4 resident-friendly councilmen, you will not get a resident-friendly vote. That's just the way it's always been. And that's why I hope you'll continue to vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Maxwell.
I want to restate the question again because the question's about community involvement and community dialogue. You gave 2 examples of Southbridge and the DDC, and so people want to talk about that. But the question is, how much community dialogue is there, and how do you want to approach that? Tammy and Becca both mentioned there's some great projects recently that we've learned from our past mistakes about we need more community involvement. And so we've had some projects that have been iterated and changed based on community involvement, and those projects have received wide support. That's the model moving forward. We need to find multi-use projects that have involved the community and got buy-off and some trade-in on the community and advance those projects. That's the model moving forward. We haven't always done that in the past, that's true, but we're getting better, we're learning, and that's the model moving forward. We need to get the developers out there in the community, pressing some flesh and talking about what they want to do, and then taking that input, iterating, come back with a different idea that everybody can be involved with. That is the issue moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. Pursuant to the League of Women Voters rules, because you have mentioned Ms. Caputi and Ms. Lenig by name, I offer them 30 seconds of rebuttal time if Ms. Caputi first wants to rebut.
Rebut as in I have to rebut Kevin, or can I agree with him? Because I love what he's saying. I absolutely think that we're doing better. We have a model now moving forward to loop people in. We do not want to make enemies of anyone in our community, and we need people who have the money to invest in our community, to keep investing in our community. Now more than ever, we certainly don't want to be closed for business. Scottsdale needs to be open for business, and we need to move forward robustly into the future. Of course, looping everyone in, having community input, having input from developers, having input from everyone. That's the model. It works. Let's keep moving forward.
Thank you, Ms. Caputi. Ms. Lennick?
Yes, I would also like to thank Kevin for mentioning that Tammy and I had agreed upon the community outreach program. And it's my feeling, and based on what we've been seeing, that the developers have a strong desire to work with us, not only as a city, but as a community as a whole. And I think that's why we see the successful projects that are being put through. And I believe that theme will continue as we move forward. We don't want to be known as a city that is unwelcome to new and fresh ideas. And so it's important to keep those lines of communication open. So thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Ms. Lennick. Last, Mr. Little.
Thank you. So let's be honest, if there's a disconnect between citizens and the development community, which there is largely because we have a 19-year-old general plan. It's flat out of date. And one of the reasons it hasn't been able to be updated is because we couldn't even agree as a community whether we're going to be the westmost western town or something more urban. We've made this binary choice. Everybody's gone to their corners and we have stopped talking about it. That's what the core problem is. Let's be honest also about the fact that development is not bad. Bad development is bad. We don't want bad development. We want quality development. We want elevated design. We're one of the most beautiful cities in the entire country. If we could focus on quality and aesthetics, those are things we can all agree on, no matter what part of this city you're from. But we've forgotten about quality, and instead we choose to argue about building height and density. Hey, I've seen a lot of tall buildings that are really beautiful. I've seen a lot of short buildings that are really ugly. So it's not about building height and density, it's about quality. Let's preserve the quality in Scottsdale. We can agree on that, and that's something we can work towards. When I was city manager, city staff used to be the gatekeeper. And if somebody brought in a bad project, we'd say, take it back and make it better. We're not taking it forward. And we ought to do that again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Little. That concludes the second portion of our program this afternoon, which means that we move on to part 3, our grab bag questions. The League of Women Voters has prepared 9 grab bag questions this afternoon. While in the green room, the candidates were assigned a number 1 through 9 that corresponds with a question. Before this moment, neither myself nor the candidates know what will be asked and to whom. Each candidate will have no longer than 1 minute per question. There will be no rebuttal offered during the grab bag. And I will start with question 1, which goes to Mr. Durham. Mr. Durham, would you be in favor of electing city council members by district, whereby the entire city would be represented on the city council? Please explain your answer.
I've had some conversations on this with former Mayor Mary Manross, and I was thinking at first that the district representation might be a good idea, but she was really opposed to it, and she had some very good and very thoughtful answers on why it's a bad idea. And one of the ones that really struck with me is the concept of horse trading between districts. That a person in District 1 could say, well, I have this project, and if the person in District 2 will support my project, I'll support yours. And it seemed to me that could lead to a lot of unseemly horse trading, where we get projects that nobody wants. And the only reason we get them is because if there was horse trading between the members of the city council. So that was one thing that really stuck out to me on why district representation would be a bad idea. Mary Manross had some other ideas on why she thought it was a bad idea. I can't think of all of them off the top of my head, unfortunately. But I came away with that conversation with her, convinced that the system that we have, with all its flaws, I think is probably better.
Thank you, Mr. Durham. Question number 2 goes to Mr. Little. Question 2, how are the demographics of Scottsdale changing? Is there an impact on housing types and costs in Scottsdale?
Yes. Yes, the demographics of Scottsdale are clearly changing. We're one of the fastest aging communities in all of America, and certainly in the desert Southwest. And one of the other demographics that's changing is we're finding it increasingly difficult to bring young families into Scottsdale where they can find affordable housing. These are critical issues. If you fast forward and try to imagine a community that's both getting older and unable to attract new families, that impacts our school districts. When you impact our school districts negatively, there's a very close nexus between school performance and quality of schools and property values. So the demographics with an aging community and the inability to attract young people and find housing is a serious issue. Also, we don't want people who are older in life and maybe on fixed incomes to have to move out of Scottsdale. We promised the citizens in the general plan that we would have life cycle housing so you could live here from when you first started out until you were a senior. So let's keep our promise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Little. Question number 3 goes to Mr. Arbach. Question 3. There are not enough preserved tax funds remaining to allow the acquisition of some of the remaining land within the voter-approved McDowell-Sonoran Preserve boundary. Should the City Council determine if citizens want to complete the preserve, and if so, how to pay for it? If not, how do you propose utilizing the remaining and the future dedicated preserve funds? Mr. Arbach.
Well, the question answers itself. The system is already established, even before I moved to Scottsdale, that when there is a need to address the finances of the McDowell-Sonoran Preserve, the voters are given an opportunity to either reject or favor paying additional tax dollars. And as I mentioned earlier, it's less than 1 penny. I would support, if I was elected to the council, to continue doing what has been a tradition within the residents' preference for the city of Scottsdale. As I alluded to earlier, people from all over the world come to visit that particular preserve, and the state land trust owns what areas that the city of Scottsdale does not own. And I would be in favor of continuing to purchase all of the remaining land from the state land trust fund to be able to put it within the jurisdiction of the makeup of the current or future Scottsdale City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Arbach. Question number 4 was drawn by Mr. Maxwell. Question 4. What are your plans to improve public transportation in and out of Scottsdale, as well as congestion within city limits?
That's a great question. Thank you so much. You know, innovation would drive a lot of this. Right now, we're a very automobile-centric community. And that is the problem. We need to deal with parking. We need to deal with traffic regulations. We need to deal with all kinds of things when we're a traffic-centric community. I think in the Old Town area, downtown area, it makes a lot of sense to try to look for innovation that makes us more pedestrian-friendly and to look for things that will help relieve traffic. Now, Chandler's done something which I think is kind of interesting, which we might consider adopting here in Scottsdale, and that is some of their large multi-use properties have lanes set aside for Uber and ride-sharing type things like that. So as that technology continues to develop and move forward, I think we need to be aware of that. Also, self-driving cars are going to come in a lot faster than we think. So that needs to evolve in the equation too. So technology and innovation will help drive a lot of that. And I think we should embrace it and make sure we keep our eyes open and keep our minds open to technology and how that can help that problem.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. On to question 5, which was drawn by Ms. Linnick. Question 5. How should the city of Scottsdale address the need for additional addiction treatment and mental health services?
Thank you for that question. I was recently surprised and proud as a Scottsdale Leadership now alumni, but I was part of the Scottsdale Leadership Class 34. And what I learned is that the city of Scottsdale has several programs, especially out of the Vista del Camino community. And I feel like those programs are very underutilized because they're not as widely known as they need to be. And so we've established some extremely useful services for all people that are in need. And so I think that we need to put more time, effort, and education for the people of Scottsdale into those programs to make them more robust and more available.
Thank you, Ms. Linick. Question number 6 was drawn by Mrs. Janik. Question 6. In the Outpost project rezoning case, rural land was rezoned to commercial adjacent to resident large lot rural land. This action was against staff recommendations and broke with a long-standing policy prohibiting such rezoning. What impact will this action have on future rezoning cases?
Really good question, because this is kind of what I'm working on. There is general discontent with many of the citizens because of the break with tradition and not following what city staff recommended. And this is why we need a citizen-friendly majority on city council. Now, the problem is it's been rezoned. It's going to be commercial. It's going to be a restaurant, among other things, gas station, etc. The people there don't want it. And we have those facilities relatively close by. The next problem is that the land adjacent to it is also for sale. So what's going to happen? Well, you did it once, now you have to do it again. And all of a sudden, what was a rural mecca for people with horse property that wanted more space will gradually, not even gradually, will erode to the detriment of the diversity of our city. So I think it's going to have a very large negative effect. And I think that's one of the decisions that we need to go back and review. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Janik. Question number 7 was drawn by Mr. Phillips. Question 7. Do you support using taxpayer funds to subsidize private-public partnerships for private sector investments, such as buildings, stadiums, promoted events, etc.? Please explain.
Well, obviously, it depends on the project. We've done that in the past with Giants and other things. I think as long as it promotes tourism in Scottsdale and the fund from our sources help the city and help the residents, and it's a benefit to everybody, then it's a good thing. Obviously, if it just helps whoever the builder is, then it's not a good thing. So you have to really do each project individually, make sure that the public gets the benefit out of it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be advisable. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Question number 8 was drawn by Ms. Caputi.
Really? I don't remember drawing one, but I'll take it.
It was virtually drawn by Ms. Caputi.
I love it.
Question 8.
I'm seeing question. Okay, good. Yep.
What is your stance on initiating or supporting an ordinance that bans discrimination in housing based on sexual orientation?
I would, hold on one second, stance on support. Okay. I would absolutely, I am not in favor of discriminating in housing based on sexual orientation. I would 100% support a non-discrimination ordinance for the city of Scottsdale. It's the right thing to do, and it's the right message for our city. We're a golden rule city, and it's really important that we make that statement, that we are open for business and everything else to all of the citizens of our community. It's not just about not discriminating in terms of business issues. It's about opening our community to everyone who wants to be here. We certainly shouldn't be sending people away. And I think it's really important to be clear on this too. I know a lot of people have been ducking behind, well, we don't really have, we have something at the federal level, so we don't need to say anything at the city level. And I've also heard people say that the state, we're waiting on the state to make an announcement about something like that. I'm definitely not in agreement of that. I think, again, as a golden rule city in Scottsdale, we need to, on 2 feet, take a stance and say that we will not tolerate discrimination on any level in our city. I'm 100% behind that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Caputi. Last, Mr. Crawford has drawn question number 9. Question 9. Are you familiar with the election method of ranked choice voting? And would you be in favor of its use for future Scottsdale elections? Among other possible benefits, this method would provide more choice for voters and eliminate the need for and expense of a runoff election if no candidate achieves a majority.
Well, I'll tell you, I thought that I had pretty good knowledge of election and politics, but I don't know what ranked choice voting is. If you'd like to explain it to me, I could answer it. If not, I'll take a pass. Sorry.
Julie,
Yes, Penny.
would you like to take a cut at it?
Absolutely. So what ranked choice voting would do in a situation like this, where we have 9 incredible candidates who we're listening to today, is it would allow voters to rank who they would prefer to represent them. And then using that, and there's a little bit of an algorithm as to how, the number 2 choice becomes the number 1 choice if the number 1 choice doesn't have enough votes. From there, it would basically mean that in elections such as this, it would eliminate the need for a runoff, and voters in one ballot would rank these 9 candidates and come to their top 3. Would that be something you support?
No, I wouldn't. I'll tell you, because if it's not broken, don't fix it. And we've had a system that has worked so well for such a long time. We have a primary. Right now we have 9 candidates, okay? So if one candidate gets 50% of the vote plus 1 as an overwhelming majority, they advance, just like Virginia Corey did in her first term. She didn't have to go to the primary or the main election. So that means that 6 people will advance. Things change over time, over the summer. Issues change. My goodness, we've had a great example of that recently. All of a sudden, the political fortunes of a couple of people have been reversed. They've changed upside down because of 3 words. So the election is a snapshot in time of the way things are at that time. And I would be opposed to changing the system that we have because it works great. It's a great tap on our democratic process. And so I would be against that. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's it for the grab bag section of our program today, which means that we are on to closing remarks. And we'll close out this afternoon with a final closing question, and during which time the candidates will have one final opportunity to share their vision for the city. Each candidate will have 1 minute for this final question, and there will be no rebuttal offered. The question is, what is your long-term vision for Scottsdale? How does this vision reconcile the historic moniker, the West's most western town, with the rapid urban expansion of high-density commercial and residential developments? And what will you do to assess and address the majority of residents, what they want their city to be? We'll begin these final remarks with Ms. Janet. Ms. Janet?
Okay, well, my vision for the city is a vision that involves all the stakeholders sitting together at the table to come up with the best possible solution to keep our city vibrant, alive, desirable, tourist attraction, and draw in new businesses. It's not mutually exclusive that you could have good development and work with the people. Papago Plaza was a good example of that. Everybody worked together, we got a really good outcome. Now, what I look forward to is that the general plan should light the path for what we want to see in the future. And the other thing is, when I mentioned that we would have 5 different zones in the city with representation from each zone, I think that would be key to bringing everybody together to make sure that we get the best possible outcome for each part of the city. So.
Thank you, Mrs. Janet. Mr. Durham.
Well, I'm proud that I've been endorsed by the Coalition of Greater Scottsdale, which is Scottsdale's leading citizens group. And along with Betty, I have a simple belief about the future of Scottsdale. and that is that the citizens get to decide what kind of city they want to live in. And so we need to listen to the citizens. And I think the citizens have made it pretty clear that they don't want 15-story buildings. Now, there's a lot of people on this phone call who would like to see more 15-story buildings, but they're not going to tell you that. John is the only one who's made his view clear, and I admire John for that, because he's going to stick to his principles, and I'm going to stick to mine, and that gives people the ability to decide what they want. I have nothing against developers, but it's got to be the citizens who run this city and not developers, and the citizens get to decide what kind of development they want. I am not against economic growth. I'm in favor of high-tech growth in the biological sciences, and growth that helps us avoid high-impact, high-density, high-traffic development. The most important thing to me is that development has to preserve and enhance our historical character and serve the people who live here.
Thank you, Mr. Durham. There's no rebuttal during closing. I'm sorry, Mr. Little, but we will hear from you. Mr. Crawford.
You know, it's amazing to me that so many of the people that oppose zoning changes and upzoning development, they actually live in properties that were upzoned. So it just doesn't pass the sniff test to me. You have got to have continued growth and continued development. But again, our city is 35 miles long. 20 years ago, I chaired council districts for Scottsdale, and we actually got it on the ballot. It was turned down by the voters because Mary Manross fought vigorously against it. But it's an issue that maybe we should think about. We should revisit. Mayor Lane campaigned for a hybrid system during his last election. We have to have separate representation. It's been mentioned that downtown Scottsdale and South Scottsdale hasn't had representation. Someone voted onto the council for well over a decade. I've lived in downtown Scottsdale with my wife for over 20 years. I've been in business in downtown Scottsdale for 20 years. So I know the issues. I know the issues citywide, but I participated in a lot of very divisive zoning issues and public safety issues where I brought people together and made it work for the benefit of the city.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Ms. Caputi.
As I started, I want Scottsdale to be better for my kids than it's been for me. My passion is the future of this city, our livability and our quality of place. That means we have to have economic vitality. We need a diverse and resilient economy. We have to have quality development with public benefits, and we have to collaborate with our schools so our kids can get a top-notch education, find good jobs from hire to retire right here in Scottsdale. There are places where development makes sense and places where it doesn't. We absolutely need to have areas of our city that are economic drivers so that we can have the other areas that we love, the beautiful open spaces, the preserve. We can only have those if we have economic drivers that allow for those to happen. I want to maintain Scottsdale's winning formula: high amenities, strong property values, low property taxes. We have to balance our open spaces with nurturing the economic drivers that make this formula work. As a mother of 3 children in our public schools, I am committed to making this city a better place for them than it is for me. Thank you for being here today. I'm Tammy Caputi, and I'd be honored for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Caputi. Mr. Albach.
I'd like to point out that as the moderator, you announced my affiliation as a Republican without mentioning the party affiliation of a single other 8 candidates. And I will remind the moderator, this is a nonpartisan race. Having said that, I'm a principled conservative and a proud Republican, a lifelong registered Republican. I've been endorsed by the Arizona Free Enterprise Club and by County Supervisor Steve Chukri, who not only represents all of Scottsdale, but is also the president of the Arizona Restaurant Association. As a private chef and the only person in this race who is in the hospitality industry, who has relationships with the hoteliers, the restaurant owners, and the bar owners, I know how to wisely enhance tourism. During the COVID-19 situation, 87% of employees in the hotel, travel, hospitality, and restaurant business have been classified as the quote, new unemployed. That is a major problem. I will enhance tourism by bringing new signature events to Scottsdale, opening up arts and leisure, education, and amphitheaters so that we can bounce back in a V-shaped recovery as quickly as possible. I ask you to vote Mike Auerbach for Scottsdale City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Auerbach. I will remind the candidates in the audience that the biographies that were submitted earlier were solicited from every candidate, and were they not solicited, received by the candidate from the League of Women Voters, they were taken from the candidate's website.
Well, that's just incorrect because I submitted to the email my bio. So I reject that unilaterally.
Just for clarity, Mr. Auerbach did submit it via email, and he did mention that he was a precinct committee person in the document.
Yes, I did. Thank you for confirming that I did submit something, Ms. Gingle, and I did not put what a party I was affiliated with. I simply put that I was a precinct committeeman, an elected precinct committeeman, by the way, for LD 23. I did not mention party.
Thank you, Mr. Auerbach. Mr. Phillips.
All righty there. So anyway, Scottsdale has about 3,000 acres left. That's it. 30 miles wide, 3 miles wide, 3,000 acres left. So we really have to wonder about what we're going to be doing. One of the reasons I was against Southbridge 2, that would have added 5,000 cars daily to downtown. It's simply not sustainable. When we talk about the general plan, this is one of the things we have to do, is we have to tighten our development standards. We can't bring in things that are going to overwhelm our system. The last plan we had in 2050, we were supposed to have 350,000 people. Right now, at the rate we're going, we'll have 500,000 people in Scottsdale. Can you imagine that traffic? So what we need is a tighter development standard for the general plan. We need a resident-friendly council that can put that through. That being said, I'm Guy Phillips. I'm incumbent, and hopefully you vote for me so I can continue to work for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Maxwell.
Once again, I mean, just the way it falls, I'm answering near the end. So I'm going to restate the question because I think that we need to focus on the task at hand. The question was about how do you balance maintaining Scottsdale's history with the new growth opportunities that are ahead of us? And that's the question at hand. And that's a difficult question because it's two things that can be opposing to one another, but they don't have to be. With cooperation, collaboration, and citizen input, we can manage both those conflicting views or conflicting visions and have a favorable outcome. So that's what we need to do. You know, that's going to take somebody who is capable of ingesting a lot of information, listening to a lot of information, and be able to come with the best outcome. And that's what I want the citizens of Scottsdale to do. I want them to take a look at this entire ninth field candidate and take a look and ask themselves, who's capable of learning information and who's capable of changing, who's capable of maybe getting off an opinion they may have had for a long time based on new information. And I think if you do that, you'll find that I'm somebody who's able to do that. Take the information in and also look at myself and say, what's the best for our city? Get my personal views out of it and what's best for the residents and what's best for the city. And that's the type of candidate you need to be voting for. My name is Kevin Maxwell. Thank you so much for your consideration. I would love to have your support.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. Mr. Little.
Yes, thank you. My vision for the city encompasses both preservation and progress. Those are two things that I'm very comfortable. I wear those well. In fact, I think in the early 2000s, I may have been the person that first characterized Scottsdale as where the Old West meets the New West. It is not a binary decision that we have to make, whether we're going to be old or new or rural or urban. We can have both those things present in the same space in this city. that, in fact, the Hash Knife Pony Express statue right at the top of the Marshall Way Bridge is a symbolic of the old generation cowboy handing off the mailbag to the new generation cowboy. So our history's captured in that one piece of art. We can be both those things. We don't have to argue incessantly about which one we're going to be. The other thing I wanted to mention was in 2018, the city council already let the horse out of the barn. They said we're going to have 15-story buildings or 150-foot building heights allowed in certain areas of our city. And that's what they did. And some of the developers that own that property, if they could create something of public benefit, were given height bonuses to be able to build to that height. So we're not going to relitigate that. People own that property. If you believe in private property rights, you have to support that. And so let's look at the future and what we want to be. We can be the westmost western town, and we can be a progressive, urban, vital, growing community, which we need to be. Growth will sustain us. It built us. And many of us live in communities that have increased density because we were smart enough to buy the preserve a long time ago, and that pushed density into other areas of the city. So we can have both. Let's do it. Let's do it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Little. Last, Ms. Linick.
Thank you. We have such a unique city. We have so many different aspects to it. And as a historic tour guide, it's always a lot of fun to bring in not only people from out of town, but also people that have lived here for a while and thought they knew so much about our city. What strikes me is that we're not very old. I always say my mom's older than the city of Scottsdale officially. And so, you know, not many of our architecture and buildings are dated that far back. And so we need to preserve the ones that are. And it was a gut punch to me when Sabas found that they had to leave our city last year, but they still are on the historic tour. So it's important that we preserve that Brown and Main corridor where we have the historic section. It's all called Old Town now due to a marketing change last year. But we do have a city Scottsdale Mall, the Little Red Schoolhouse, and Los Olivos. And what really strikes me is that the majority of our history is still owned and operated by the same families. And that says a lot about how deep our community is. And so, you know, I think we need to celebrate the fact that we have some incredible businesses. And I would love to see downtown arts and culture get an injection of new business. And I was excited about the passing of the bond project. I was on that committee as well. And they were talking about the amphitheater as well as injecting some new art pieces in downtown. So my favorite question to ask people is, when's the last time you were downtown shopping? And they say, oh, we go to eat there all the time. I said, no, I'm saying, when's the last time you went downtown shopping? And so people are looking for the experience. And I think that we can give that to them. And that's the future of Scottsdale. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Linick. And thank you to all of the candidates for your participation, and to you, the viewers, for your attention. And again, thank you to the League of Women Voters and the members for organizing this event, and to the National Council of Jewish Women for helping sponsor it. It has been my pleasure this afternoon to be your moderator, and I will return the floor to Penny Sharon to close us out this afternoon.